Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley here on SNY.TV. I am Ian Begley, SNY NBA insider, and I've got two great guests with me today. We're going to be breaking down all things Knicks, trade notes, skid, loss to Detroit, all of it. And with me today, I have James Edwards III of The Athletic. Does a great job covering the Knicks for The Athletic, covers them like a blanket. He's around the team all the time. And I have Mr. Denny Blanco. Denny, you can catch him on many platforms, including Twitter, and he's got informed and entertaining takes, including some Knicks takes. So we're ready to get into it. But before we do, just be sure to leave any questions you might have in the replies, because we'll get to those later in the show. And also, we are in podcast form, so be sure to check us out there. Anywhere you download your podcast, you can find the Putback in podcast form. And as always, we are starting with the baseline. Knicks are finished at the midway point after the loss to Detroit on Monday, so we're halfway into the season. I'm wondering how people are assessing this team at the moment, and to get James's thoughts, we'll start there. James, third in the East, 26-15. I'm excited to hear what you think about this team.
Yeah, you would think that the sky is falling, obviously, as online as we all are. And I understand it, right? I think for a lot of fans, the anticipation for this season, the expectations that came with it, people were excited. And I think because of that excitement, you now see them at 26-15. They have some interesting losses. They haven't beaten the best teams in the league, and people are kind of worrying and panicking. But at the end of the day, this is the best start the franchise has had in quite some time. I know it's kind of hard to forget, but this team is relatively brand new with one another. Obviously, adding Mikal and Cat this offseason, Cat right before training camp, and even OG around this time last year, and he didn't play too much. So you're working in three guys who have such big roles on this roster. You're changing the way you play from a year ago, basically flipping the offense upside down, where they're a ball movement team that cuts, wants to shoot a lot of threes, as opposed to last year where they were a little bit more defensive minded, a little bit more pick and roll bound. It's just different, and this team is working out the kinks. I think, and I'm sure we'll talk about the minutes at some point, I do think that the fact that the starters have been healthy has been good in helping this team get to this point in the season, right? Like, I think the fact that they've been able to build chemistry. Now, I don't think it's translated to the defensive side of the ball, and again, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But offensively, they came out the gate pretty much really good, and they've been able to kind of iron out those kinks and continue along and figure stuff out. So I understand fans' frustration, especially if this is just naturally one of the most exciting periods you've had as a Knicks fan. But at the end of the day, they're third in the East, fifth best net rating, third best offense, and they're doing something that a Knicks team hasn't done around these parts in a while.
I feel like Tom Thibodeau would appreciate you pointing out that net rating. He tells us regularly in his press conferences. Denny, what about you? Where are you on the Knicks right now?
Well, James hit a lot of points that I totally agree with. The folks that are upset, you guys, relax. It's okay. What are we talking about? We're talking about third in the East. All right, we're talking about being in contention. We're talking about you actually expecting to be there April, May, and June. I think that those expectations should be there with this team that is assembled right now. But yes, when the Knicks, lose to teams that Knicks fans are expecting them to beat, like Detroit last night, yeah, you definitely have some folks that are upset. But if you look at the game, watch the game, definitely some things that need to be ironed out, but I don't think it's anything crazy that the Knicks won't be able to solve in the next couple of games, weeks, etc. Whether it's turnovers, minimizing those, because there were a lot of turnovers last night, or whether it's actually strategic when it comes to defense. Those things can be ironed out in the next couple of games going forward in the future. So, Knicks fans, I want you guys to relax. I want you guys to understand that there is some light at the end of the tunnel if you feel there is none. You're third in the East. Come on, Ian.
Look, I appreciate the positivity. Just to bring the counterpoint, I'm going to go here with this team. I still don't feel like they are together as one unit. I feel like there's still like kind of disparate pieces here and there that you see throughout these games where they don't seem like they're all on the same page. I mean, from an X's and O standpoint, sure, but also just from a general team standpoint. Maybe that comes with time too. Maybe it's unfair to expect that through just 41 games of a new roster. And the other piece is the defense. It's really been up and down and more down than up. And I do think that offense is not going to be a problem with this team. And the factor here to determine how far they can go in the spring is their defense. And then I look at OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges. And look, there's 5 people on the floor when you're playing defense. To single one player out, 2 players out, it's often tricky. It's often misleading. But night like last night, for instance, Cade Cunningham, tough cover for sure. Lead guard, somebody who maybe the wing in Bridges and the wing in Anunoby wouldn't guard all the time, but still, I think that you bring those guys here, you trade those picks, you spend that money in the case of Anunoby to be able to slow down Cade Cunningham more than you did last night. And so I think it's fair to want to see more from those 2 guys, not even on offense, because the offense will come and go, but defensively to try to get things turned in a more consistent direction on that side of the ball. But we will see how that goes. And James, I'm curious for you, Karl Towns, we'll talk about the thumb a little bit later, but your thoughts on him, his first half.
Yeah, I've been thoroughly impressed with Karl. Obviously, the shooting is what it is and what it always has been. I still even would like to see him get up even more threes. But in terms of just what's really popped for me, the rebounding. You tend to forget that this guy early in his career was an elite rebounder before he got paired with Rudy Gobert. And then you saw those rebounding numbers dip. And now that he's the lone center, he's right back into the trenches, right? Like if there was anybody who questioned Cat's toughness or his demeanor, like those have been put to rest. Like he is leading, I think he's second in rebounding. I think he's leading the league in contested rebounds. He's done everything you can ask in that regard. And then the passing. Obviously his shooting brings a lot of gravity. There's always eyes on him. And his ability to find players on time, on target, the cutters, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, it's just opened up a lot for the New York offense. And I've been thoroughly impressed with Cat. He's an MVP candidate. Defensively, right, like there are things that New York needs to figure out. Are they best with him as a 5? I mean, I think there is a reason that the Timberwolves went and got Rudy Gobert. Like that can't be ignored. Is there a way to disguise it if he is the 5? Because offensively, what you want is for him to be kind of that floor spacing big, and you want him to be the 5 on offense if you can, and then the 4 on defense if you have an elite rim protector next to him. They do not have that right now, so they have to figure out ways to kind of cover him up. It starts obviously with what's in front of them. They need the guys in front of them to consistently be what they were brought here to do, of course. But when he gets to the rim, he's got to do a better job of contesting and making things uncomfortable for shooters and ball handlers. But overall, he's been really good. I think he's exceeded my expectations. I didn't expect the rebounding to pop like it did. I knew he was a good passer, but he's adding some flair too. Overall, the Karl Anthony Towns experience has been good for New York.
Denny, breakdown with Denny Blanco. Be sure to catch that on Denny's social media channels. Denny, where are you on Mikal Bridges after the first half of the season?
The big meow?
No, not the big meow, but the former Brooklyn Bridge, now Manhattan Bridge, Mikal Bridges. Where are you on him?
Oh, Mikal, not the big meow. Well, listen, Mikal Bridges, man, people have to understand he came from Brooklyn. So it's a different environment being the guy versus coming to New York and being what? The third guy, right? Behind Cat and Jalen. So, yeah, his numbers are going to be a little streaky. But for all of December, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, all of December, I think, Mikal Bridges was playing very, very well. And obviously last night he dropped some numbers. But I think what these Knicks fans want to see is, the defensive prowess. I think they want to see the other best team's wing shoot a bad percentage when Mikal's guarding them or when OG's guarding them. They are full of offense. Obviously, the Knicks, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, you have Jalen Brunson. They're going to get the points. It's the defense that's going to be the question. And Mikal, I think, has, they're going to be games where Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson have it going. And Mikal's going to have to get it where he gets it. Just kind of like Josh. He's going to have to get it where he gets it. But he's going to have to increase the intensity on defense. I don't know what that's going to look like. Same with OG going into the next couple of games. But maybe that has something to do with, some rest. I don't know. But defensively, they have a ways to go in terms of Mikal Bridges on the wing. You're not stopping these guys that are superstars, all-stars, guys that are going to be able to do, like Cade Cunningham's guy's phenomenal. You're not going to stop him, but you need to slow him down by any means necessary if you're trying to be competitive.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments are made and how things change on that end again for the Knicks. And let's just get into that Detroit game briefly, James. James, you covered the Pistons for a while before you came over here to New York, so you know that team well. What did you see those last 2 threes, Malik Beasley getting open, that should have happened that didn't happen there for New York?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold, right? Like, it shows how far the Pistons have come and the importance of just putting spacing around Cade. They double the ball, force it out of Cade's hands, but the first pass is Tim Hardaway Jr., who New York fans know and some probably love, some probably hate. Like, he's capable of hitting that shot. So Josh has to respect that. And then he swings it over to Malik, who is probably the last one that you want to shoot that shot in the corner, and he knocks it down back-to-back. So slow rotating. I don't know if I want to say defensive communication, but certainly just a little out of sync there. They were a little step behind all night defensively. I thought they were okay at times, especially like kind of crowding Cade and making life uncomfortable in that first half. But then as the game went on, he found his rhythm. They were able to move the ball. They were able to find corner shooters, really good corner shooters at that. And they were able to get out in transition. Knicks turning the ball over, and that Pistons team, when they get out in transition with Cade's passing, the athleticism of Asar Thompson, it can get dangerous. So to the Knicks' credit, I think we should mention it was the second night of a back-to-back. The Pistons are a really good are a good team. I think people who maybe don't pay attention to all the teams outside of New York, and the last thing they remember about Detroit is what happened last year. Like, this team has been the hottest team in basketball pretty much since the end of December. I think they're 8-2 over their last 10 or 9-2 over their last 11. Cade is beyond all-star talk at this point. Like, we're getting into all NBA conversation with him. And it's just a good team that is a tough one to run into on the second night of a back-to-back. And I think New York in general has had trouble with kind of athletic teams who are able to play fast. And the Pistons are one of them when they can force you to turn it over.
Yeah, and you look at Detroit overall, I believe, that was the second Knick loss at home to the Pistons this year. They did get one in Detroit, and then we've talked a lot about how they haven't beat either of the top 2 teams in either conference. And after the loss earlier this week, I believe they were 1-6 against the top 8 teams in the NBA, if you included the Knicks in that group. Just haven't really played well against the top teams, and a Pistons team that's coming on they've also struggled with. And then, they do have the toughest remaining schedule in the league, according to tankathon.com. So the rest of the way is not going to be any easier for this Knick team. And so, Denny, when you look at this thing going into the second half, where do you think the Knicks can finish in the hierarchy of the East?
No, I think they're going to stay top 3. I believe they'll stay top 3, even if, obviously February trade deadline comes. You never know what happens around that particular window. But as constructed, I look at the East and I look what everybody's doing. They'll stay third. But, these quarterback defensive conversations, even when mentioning last night's game, it's very easy to look at that last play and say, okay, here comes the actual screen on Cade Cunningham, and he comes off, and then all of a sudden it's a double, Mikal and Brunson on Cade. He swings it to Tim Hardaway. Now Josh has to make a decision during the game. Watching the game last night, just for last night, I would have said possibly just stunt to Tim and let him shoot that wide open 3, because he was streaky the whole game. He was like 2 for 8, I think, from 3. Versus Malik Beasley, who was like 6 for 8, or at the time 6 for 7. He was just hot. Beasley was hot off the bench. So in my head, I'm like, no, shade Beasley. Let Tim. If Tim ends it, Tim ends it. It is what it is. But moving forward, again, the Knicks. I think you guys are going to be okay. I think you guys, even with the hardest schedule, I think these guys are going to come together, learn each other a little bit more, and I think OG and Michaela will get better on the wings. So I don't think it'll be a hard turn when it comes to these the schedule and it being harder. I think it'll be good for the actual Knicks to have a tougher schedule. So come playoff time, they know what they're dealing with.
Yes, that's a good point. Seeing where they will end up and who they may end up facing. You're going to see those teams in the second half. We want to get into the Josh Hart quote that seemed to get some attention recently. He'd said a couple times recently that the Knicks have to go out there without any egos, without any individual agenda, have to go out there and sacrifice. And, people were wondering, who's he talking about? Is he talking about somebody? Is he just talking to throw out cliches? I just talked to a few people in the aftermath of it. Some people internally don't think he was just throwing out cliches. I can't guess at who Josh was addressing specifically. I feel very comfortable in saying it was not Jalen Brunson because of their relationship. And, Josh saying that twice in the span of a few days. It should raise some eyebrows, and it kind of goes back to what I was referencing earlier, that the group doesn't feel like a singular unit yet. I think that there's still, things to clean up, even from like the team cohesion standpoint, before you can get there. And again, is it fair to think that comes 41 games in? I don't know, but Josh saying what he said, I think it does raise some eyebrows. And I don't think he was talking about Brunson. I could give you educated guesses on who I think he was talking about, but that doesn't really do anything. James, you're in the locker room all the time. What do you make of those comments from Josh?
Yeah, like you, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you can understand where he comes from, right? Like it hasn't looked like a complete picture for this team yet. And I think a lot of their mistakes are rooted in and I'm talking about on defense. How do I want to say this?
Would you say trust?
Communication?
I think trust and communication, but I also think, here, I'll say this. I'll try to use this example. OG Anunoby is a great defender, and some of what makes him great is his gambling and just the way he tries to pounce on the ball and the way he tries to come out of nowhere and take a player out of the action, right? And you guys hear Tibbs talk about it all the time, like, we have to make sure our shell is correct. We have to make sure we're intact. Like, it's a 5-man thing. And it's not just OG, but I'm just using him as an example because of how much he takes pride in being able to kind of cause chaos and how much that makes him the special defender that he is. But also when you take risks, it breaks down the shell of the defense, right? So that's part of like the team not necessarily looking as a cohesive unit. And there's other examples that we could point to on both sides of the ball, but certainly like, this just does not look like a team that's on a string. And, whether or not that is due to, specific styles of play or this, that, and the third, we can all, like you said, Ian, we can make educated guesses, but it's certainly this team just does not look, and specifically defensively, on a string. And I think that's been the biggest issue with it so far, with the team so far.
Yeah, definitely. And Denny, I want to hear your thoughts on this, but James, I want to put you on the spot for a second. I keep staring at your Michigan State hat. Who is your top Michigan State basketball player? I shouldn't say that because that's Magic Johnson. Give me in your era, top 3.
All right, so Drew Neitzel actually made me a Michigan State fan, if people remember Drew Neitzel.
Wow.
I don't know how many people outside of Michigan will, but my dad is a big-time Michigan State fan. I was a jackass kid, and I was competitive, so I liked Michigan as a kid.
Right.
And then I watched Drew Neitzel drop 40 on like Butler. I'm like, all right, Dad, I'm coming over to the dark side. And then that was at like the age of 10. Shannon Brown, who had a cup of coffee in the NBA.
He was a Knick for a second.
He was a Knick for a second. Yep. Won a title with the Lakers. And then my third, That's a good one. I liked Maurice Ager. He had a cup of coffee in the NBA too with the Dallas Mavericks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Early 2000s. Early 2000s was my. I could pick all the Flintstones too. I'm from Flint,
Right.
Michigan. That's the team that won the title, but I'll go with those ones. My early childhood with those teams.
All right. Thank you for the insight.
Of
Appreciate
course.
it.
Thank you for asking, Ian.
Yeah, I like it. And go blue.
Don't do that. Come on.
Denny, Josh Hart, the comments. We got to play without ego. Got to play with individual sacrifices, without individual agendas. As you hear those, do you ring an alarm bell? Do you say it's nothing? What do you think?
I mean, for me, it's nothing. I don't try to create narratives based on statements, unless a name is being said or of that sort. But other than that, if Josh is saying something, I'm going to take him as one of the de facto leaders of the team. He sees something. So I pay attention to it. I don't want to point to who it is, but maybe overall it's just a matter of everyone getting out of their own way and just doing what they're supposed to do. Maybe that's what he's implying. Because I mean, he didn't say that when they beat, Milwaukee the day before. So when you take a loss and a winnable game too, this game was winnable. Just a couple of particular changes here and there, especially like I said, turnovers. Cat, I think, had 6. So you clean those things up, and that comes with, again, consistency, communication, being able to continuously play with your teammates and learn them. That's going to come after a period of time. But Josh has the right to say what he needs to say, and I have no idea who he's speaking about. Maybe he's just talking about in general how the team operates defensively, and just having no egos and just being able to communicate and talk. So maybe he was mentioning it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a locker room issue, but also to me, you can look at the coaching staff too, because the coaching staff is probably aware of what Josh is talking about if he's referencing something real. And it's on coaches, Tom Thibodeau on down, and leadership in the locker room, Jalen Brunson on down, to kind of figure it out, get to the bottom of it, and get better. And so we'll see what happens here in the second half. Right now, we are going to move on to the What We Learned segment, and that's presented by Binghamton University. Binghamton University was named the top school in the SUNY system, according to recent rankings from the Wall Street Journal and Forbes. Visit binghamton.edu for more. Let's get into a little trade deadline chatter. James, you wrote an article spelling out how difficult it will be for the Knicks to add significant talent to the bench, and that was the premise of your article. I think you threw out some trades, but not necessarily just to hit the trade machine. You were trying to explain why it is so difficult for this Knicks team currently to make a significant addition on the bench. Can you explain that to us a little bit?
Yeah, no. Listen, this team needs bench help, right? And they've invested all of their coin into the starting unit. And the biggest contract that they have that so far has not been consequential to the season is Mitchell Robinson. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, Ann, as somebody who's tapped in around the league as well. Like, I'm not certain that, one, the Knicks are able to move him right now. Last we heard, he still isn't sprinting. And again, he could be a salary dump for a tanking team. But you still wonder, like, are the Knicks and their limited assets willing to give up some of those just to dump Mitchell Robinson? That's a question they have to ask themselves, and they only know what's out there. And then you look beyond that, there is no other significant contract that would help bring back a player of real significance. And if you're just talking about how much guys make, I mentioned Simone Fontecchio, who Detroit played last night. Like, the reason you bring him up is because he's a guy who's had a struggling season. Last year was really good. But he makes $7.9 million or $7.6 million, right? So for the Knicks to even get that to that number, and remember, the Knicks can't take back more than they send out, they have to trade 2 players. It would have to be a Precious and I think in Campaign, who I think has been really good. And I'm not saying that the Knicks should trade Campaign. I'm saying if they want to adjust their bench in situations like that, they may have to move 2 players because of the financials. It is a situation where they have to really look deep and realize, or at least ask themselves, do we want to use these limited assets now, or do we want to wait, use this as an evaluation period, see what becomes available, and take it to next summer? it's a very interesting conversation and a dilemma that they find themselves in because of being a top heavy roster, and with that, Mitch's unavailability. So, yeah, I think for a lot of fans, I think you should know that for them to make, I think, the significant of a bench upgrade as you would like, it's going to have to involve multiple players more than likely. And so if you're asking why are we deleting depth, just why are we trading 2 for 1 when we need more depth? Well, it's the impact of that player that you're getting. That's what's going to be important, right? Like, you guys want more Tyler Kolek? Well, if they're forced to move campaign because they need matching salaries, well, there you go. It's time for Tyler Kolek to figure it out, or they can sign somebody in the aftermarket, right? So it's a weird situation, one that they knew was coming more than likely, just given how they built the team. But yeah, Ian, I'd like to hear your thoughts on kind of like, if you think too that, and I know you've talked about it and we've talked about it sitting next to each other at games, but the monkey wrench of Mitchell Robinson not being available as we get closer to the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's a tricky dance there, and with the Knicks too, like James, you referenced like the financials, and they do need to match dollar for dollar because they are a first apron team, and then they're capped at the second apron, so you can't bring back more salary in a trade, and so it is tricky. And Denny, before I hit on Mitch, I want to ask you to put your Leon Rose hat on. And I want to ask you, as the president of the New York Knicks, do you trust Mitchell Robinson coming back and being that backup 5 that you need to go where you want to go? Do you not trust it? And then subsequently, do you look for a move there to bring another center on? And who is that? Leon, let's hear it.
Thank you for allowing me to be president of the Knicks for a couple of seconds. I appreciate it. I'm put my president's hat on and get to work. First thing I'll do as president of your New York Knicks, I would definitely look to move Mitch, because at this point, you Knicks fans, you need you need to develop your bench, number one. So, okay, you got Huck Party sitting there as well, right? So maybe he takes Mitchell Robinson's minutes. That's number one. And then you mentioned also, James, you mentioned campaign being at the, if they trade Mitchell, is going to have to be 2 players possibly. Let's say hypothetically, Cam and Precious. Let's reverse engineer this. Knicks fans, let me ask you a question. You mean to tell me, if I told you you could possibly get a player that will vault you into championship status, basically not even guaranteeing, so you can't guarantee anything, but it'll actually vault you to championship status, and all it will take is Cam, Payne, and Precious. You're not going to pull that trade? Yes, you will. Stop the nonsense. You're going to pull the trade. I will pull the trade. And now coming back, what's coming back? That's the question. When I look at Cat and I look at what he, James mentioned it earlier, going from 4 to 5. If we're trying to, Knicks fans, overtake Cleveland and Boston, depending on the seeding, if you're going to take on Boston, let's say hypothetically in Eastern Conference Final, you're going to need 5 players on that floor who actually a threat offensively. 5, not 4, because in the past it's been everyone and then Mitch Robinson, being a defender. You need to beat at least Boston. You need 5 guys that are offensive threats. In terms of Cleveland, possibly not, because obviously they got Allen. He's a different type of center than Hartford, as well as Kristaps Porzingis. So yes, to land the plane very quickly. Yes, I think they need more help. Number one, and I think when you mentioned the 4 and the 5, James, when you mentioned earlier, I think you're 100% correct. Hypothetically, you get another 4 or 5 that can shoot, that can actually be a threat next to Cat. Now you're cooking with some grease, because now you defensively, you're going to have to try to decide where you go.
Yeah, and I think, though, that it does take away spacing on the other end of the floor, which I wonder how that enters the equation with Mitchell Robinson. James, you mentioned it, not sprinting yet, and that's I think it certainly raises some alarm bells, because Tom Thibodeau still thinks that Mitchell Robinson will be cleared for practice by the end of the month, but he just hasn't progressed, I guess, to that point where he's sprinting. I do believe, though, that there is I want to say a solid belief that he will be back, and they will have him back on the floor. I think early February So I do think that's a real thing. Now, do you wait that long, or do you move on and do you try to pick up somebody else? I do think Jonas Valanciunas will be somebody that's on their radar if they do decide to move on for Mitchell Robinson and decide that they need somebody else in there. So, that's a name to keep an eye on. But I really think in a perfect world, Mitch comes back, he's healthy, he shows he can play, and then they move forward there, because I think we kind of forget how good he is, offensive rebounding, defending the rim, and how high level he was playing at before he got hurt last year. A few injuries, the first one, and then the Embiid takedown. So I think best case scenario for them is that happens. And everything that I'd heard was that he'd been making linear progress on that rehab, and that nobody had expected him, to not be back at some point. And so I think look at February there, and then we'll see where they go. Jericho Sims, James, too, another name that has come up. We talked about last show that I thought the Knicks would take calls on him until the deadline. Our friend Stephen Bondi, New York Post, said that the Knicks are shopping Jericho Sims. I think both are accurate. I think that they would probably get picks in a return in a Sims trade if you're looking at the trade machine and trading out Sims for a rotation player. I think it's more likely to be picks. But James, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm with you. You kind of look around the league, and I think it should be reminded that Jericho's only making $2 million this year, right? So it's very hard to find a player who you think could help if you want to do a 1-for-1. I mentioned the other day, kind of Alec Burks, New York fans, hello.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a guy who's making $2 million a year, adds another shot maker to your bench, or and potential shot creator, right? But can you get a second round pick for Jericho Sims to add to your asset tool? Can you get 2? I don't know if teams are giving up 2 for him, maybe 1, right? But I'm very curious to see what his market is as a guy who is still young, hasn't really developed a ton, has shown good moments defensively. Obviously, offensively, is not a guy that's really looking to score, but can be a lob threat. So I'm very curious just to see how other teams around the league view him. But from a Knicks perspective, it's like, they have Precious there. Mitch is at some point will be back. You have Ariel Huckporty. There's just a little redundancy in that front court. So if you want to get what you can to either bolster your asset pool or maybe try to reorganize the chairs on the bench and bring in somebody else with a different skill set, it makes the most sense.
One of your proposed deals, James, as you were spelling out the Knicks' financial situation, was Nick Richards coming to New York, Precious Achiuwa, and 2 future seconds going to Charlotte. Richards is a name that's been out there. The Knicks had interest in him in the offseason. I haven't heard much to date there in terms of interest at this point. Obviously, it depends on Mitchell Robinson, but I think it's probably less likely to happen at this point with Nick Richards and Charlotte. But the math there is interesting, and Achiuwa not having the no trade clause that he waived to sign the deal in New York also is a factor here come trade deadline. We're going to swing to our talkback section shortly. I want to get through quick injury updates. We kind of went through Mitchell Robinson already, how he's not running yet. Thibodeau still thinking that he will be back cleared for practice by the end of the month. Jalen Brunson's shoulder obviously played against Detroit after injuring the shoulder the day before. And, we didn't see any strong impact of that shoulder injury when he was out there. Jericho Sims back spasms. That just came up kind of before the game. We didn't get a chance to talk to him about it. We'll see his status Wednesday, but if I were to guess, I would guess he was still out with those back spasms. And then the big one, Karl-Anthony Towns' thumb. Karl-Anthony Towns hurt his thumb during that Detroit game. He was in clear discomfort. It didn't really give us much after the game. He said more than a few times, it is what it is, when he was asked about the thumb. I don't know, maybe he was doing a promo for Cameron and Mason's show. He isn't coming back, but he didn't give us much. So I can only say that I think there was some tape on the thumb, and it seemed like he was using his hand pretty regularly as we saw him after the game. We'll see where he is Wednesday. With that, let's get to the talkback section of the show where we take questions from you guys. Very excited to hear what you guys want to ask, and I definitely want to hear Denny's thoughts on a question here. So, do we have Matt? Yes, there he is. Matt,
I'm here. Don't worry, Ian. We're always on it here. All right, we got you on the tech side. You just do your beautiful job hosting. You're good. Well, let's start with Denny, since Ian started out there. So, Denny, I'm curious for you. We mentioned, I think, the Knicks are kind of firmly in that top three of the East, but any teams in that bottom portion that you think the Knicks should be particularly wary of in a first-round matchup as we are at the halfway point of the season?
No, none. No, none. As I'm going down and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Let me, if I can, the NBA whisperer, Denny Blanco. Let me take a minute. Hold on. Okay, so I'm looking at Philly. No, that's not gonna work. Atlanta, no, that's not gonna work. Indiana, that's not. Oh, I said Atlanta. So I said Atlanta. Somebody said. Somebody like in Atlanta. Okay. But for me, I'm looking at these teams and I'm like, okay, how do they match up? And then the Bucks, obviously, how do they match up with the Knicks? Is there an immediate advantage with Big Cat? And when I look at Philly, Atlanta, the Bucks, Cat has an immediate advantage, obviously, depending on where Giannis defends in the Bucks, but he has an immediate big man advantage. So that's plus number one to the Knicks when I look at, will any of these teams fight their way up and run past the Knicks? So, yeah, no fear, Knicks fans. You're okay. No fear.
All right, cool. We're good. Nothing to worry about. James, I want to pop over to you. I was reading your great piece in The Athletic today about just checking on some of the things that are working well and not working for the Knicks. And we talked a little bit about defense, but I want to get into a little bit more. You mentioned they've been middle of the road, and you specifically pointed out without a rim protector. I know we've talked about the Mitch return, a potential guy they could add. So I'm curious, as we kind of, hit the midway point, we talked a little about the playoffs. As they get to the playoffs, how you see their defense looking. Let's paint a situation in which it's either Mitch or maybe they can expect some sort of rim protector in addition to what they have now. I'm curious if you think that their defense can kind of hit another level when they introduce that element in the playoffs.
I think if Mitch comes back and is 80% of the player he was before he went down, that changes a lot of things. Now, do I still think that there are things within the intricacies of the defense that I think need to be addressed? Yes, I talked about it. Guys gambling, kind of not keeping the shell, being just foundationally together, I think is the thing that they need to address. And I think that's something that they can only address internally, like conversations with one another and making sure that gets ironed out. But with that said, if Mitch can be anywhere close to healthy, that makes up for a lot of mistakes. Just having somebody there that, one, can block shots at the rim, but more importantly, deter guys from driving to the rim and putting up shots. I don't necessarily think it addresses everything that they need defensively, but it's a big help when you have somebody like that who brings that type of fear into shot takers. So the big question always has been, will Mitch be available? And if he is available, is he healthy? And I don't think it's fair I don't think anybody would be wrong if they're just assuming that he's not going to come back and be 100%, or if he's not going to come back and be gone again. I think history speaks for itself. So they'll have to figure that out. Whether or not they address that, I think will be interesting. I think we saw the perfect fit for the Knicks last night in Isaiah Stewart. But the issue with that is the only way that they could get him is by trading Mitch, or they'd have to empty their bench to get to the $14-15 million that he makes. So that's why you toss around the guys like Nick Richards, who are just physical presence at the rim. Jonas Valanciunas, again, physical, strong. I could see Washington possibly being a dumping ground, I think, as Ian kind of alluded to take on Mitch if it comes with picks, because they are tanking. And Valanciunas, I believe, is only making $6 million. So maybe the Knicks save a little bit of money there too.
Sure. Washington's tanking?
You mentioned Valanciunas. Briefly, I'm looking at, so James, follow me if you will. Valanciunas starts, Cat at the 4. Let's just create a starting 5. Cat at the 4, OG, Mikal, and Jalen. So that's just would that be your starting Nick 5?
I wouldn't start Valanciunas, no.
Okay, you wouldn't.
It would be the same starting group, just you have Valanciunas off the bench, who I think would be an upgrade. Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm looking at, once again, I'm just looking. I'm assuming the Knicks are going to play Cleveland, Boston somewhere down the line. I'm just
maybe you tweak that. Yeah, maybe you tweak it in a series if things don't go well, for sure. But I think for the regular season, I would still keep the same starters, and Valanciunas just be the kind of the bench upgrade that they could use, for sure.
Phenomenal.
Good question. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, we'll know a lot more about a month from now, right? Once we get to the trade deadline and see how everything plays out. Ian, speaking of all that stuff, I want to come back to you with one. Sienna from YouTube. Shout out my Sienna Saints. You guys were mentioning all the colleges earlier. A lot of trade rumors around Sims. Does that mean the front office has more confidence in Huckporty playing backup minutes, indicative of their confidence in Mitch? Just curious for maybe fleshing out a little bit more of that, Jericho Sims chatter that's been out and what it means for the rest of the roster, if anything.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that it has any reflection or bears any evidence into how they feel about Mitchell Robinson. I do think that it does reflect something on Ariel Huckporty, and I think that if you talk to people who have been in touch with the team, they really like Huckporty. They like what he can do. They like his athleticism, his size, and whether he can step in there and be regular in this rotation, I'm not sure. But I do think that the willingness to not willingness, I shouldn't say willingness, I should say the willingness to listen on Jericho Sims is a reflection a bit on Ariel Huckporty and how they feel about him. I forgot to mention this before, but I did hear that with Denver, Michael Porter Jr., he continues to come up in talks with teams, talking to the Nuggets. So obviously not a Knick thing, but just something to keep an eye on around the league. But yeah, certainly Huckporty, I think he's viewed positively throughout the organization. And so we'll see where that shakes out with Jericho.
Noted. All right, my last one for you guys, Ian, and then Denny, I also want yours because you asked James his top college basketball players. I got to know yours, Ian. For me, I mentioned my Sienna Saints. I had a lot of the same four guys. My guy Marquise Wright was our point guard when I was there 4 years. Made it to the MAC championship 1 year. I will always have it out for Iona College because they knocked us out 3 of the 4 years. Iona, sorry. So Ian and Denny, I got to get yours too. Let's start with Ian.
All right, I went to the University of Richmond, so I'm going to go Kenny Atkinson, longtime Spider, obviously now head coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's been very good. Dayon Merritt, he was a point guard. I think he went to St. Ray's in the Bronx, and then he came to play at Richmond. So I think that he held a special place for me. And then I'm not going player. I'm going to go Dick Durant. He was the coach at Richmond when they knocked off Charles Barkley and Auburn in the NCAAs. So a special moment for the program. So that's where I go with my top 3 for the Spiders.
Nice. Danny?
Listen, I went to Lehman College, D3, baby.
Good program.
I went D3, baby. So, the names aren't going to be the same names that you guys have dropped. So, I may not have any college names for you, but, I'm a college head in general. So, I mean, there's so many names of just fandom. You mentioned a couple of names, James, from Michigan State. I can go all over all over the college scoreboard, whether it's Syracuse, whether it's UCLA, but I'm throwing names back. Like obviously Carmelo Anthony in Syracuse. The O'Bannon brothers. Some of you may not even know the O'Bannon brothers. UCLA, which
played in Detroit for a little bit.
They were phenomenal. Toby Bailey in UCLA. And lastly, probably my most favorite college team of all time, the Arizona Wildcats with Mike Bibby, Dickinson, and
Miles Simon.
Miles, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
My favorites, they beat, for those that don't know, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, go take a look. They beat, if I'm not mistaken, if not 3 or 4 number ones on the way to the chip. I think it was 3. So they beat 3 number ones on the way to the chip. That's why I love that Arizona Wildcat team.
Was Luke Walton on that team, or was he on a different team? He might have been later.
You said Luke Walton
was later, right?
I think it was later. Yeah, it was later.
Yeah, I think he was with the Richard Jefferson Gilbert team.
Gilbert Arenas. Yeah, he was on that team.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
before we go, and I feel terrible, I left this man out. Shout out to Steve Smith, Smitty.
Smitty.
That's my guy. If you're listening, Smitty, what up, though? Michigan State legend and great player in the NBA. Shout out to Smitty.
We'll look for you, James. So find it. Don't worry. We got it.
Thank
All right, that's all I got, Ian.
All right, Matthew, thank you very much. I think that'll pretty much do it for us because we do have some fun games coming up here. Philly Wednesday, Friday. Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo come back to town, and I'm just going to ask you guys, yes or no. Julius Randle booed, yes or no, James?
All right, really quick. I'm sorry. My recollection of Nick's relationship with Julius is always online, right? Like I didn't cover him. So I think I might be skewed. I say he gets booed, but also I wasn't in the arena when Julius was there. And I understand that there are some fans who have an appreciation for how he helped turn the organization around. But again, I was from afar when Julius was there, and I only saw the reaction online, so I say booed.
Denny.
50-50.
Yeah.
You're going to have 50. Yeah, you're going to have 50. Love what he did. Again, you have to understand the hate train for Julius, whatever you want to call it. The man came here when nobody wanted to come here and went to work and was an all-star. Okay, so if you want to give him props for that, give him props for that and move on. But yeah, 50-50, more than likely.
I'm with Denny. I think it'll be a mixed reaction. I think he deserves cheers just because of what you guys mentioned, the blood, sweat, and tears he put into this place to get things turned around. I mean, go look at his first season in New York and how he bounced back year 2 and then go from there. He was certainly a net positive here, did a lot for the franchise. But we will see. Friday night in the Garden tends to be a loud crowd, passionate crowd. So we'll see how it shakes out. And that'll do it for us on the Putback. James Edwards of The Athletic, Sir Denny Blanco. You can find him on Twitter and everywhere else. Really appreciate you guys jumping on with us. We will be back January 22nd, next Wednesday. So we'll definitely talk to you guys then. Look forward to it. In the meantime, enjoy the basketball.